Good morning, Kevin. How you doing?
Good, no complaints. Hot and humid here in Boston. A nice summer day. We complain in the winter and complain in the summer, and there's no season in between.
Oh, is that how that works there?
Yeah, I mean, back in 2013, we had the big snowstorm, and there was ice, like snow mountains that were still melting in July.
Like
So,
glaciers.
yeah, more like the snow plows is putting everything into a parking lot, but
Whoa.
the vestiges were still there like 7 months later.
Okay. But that wasn't
But
this year, was it?
not this year. No,
Okay.
this year is normal, but things are good. Yeah, how have you been since Summit was the last time that we hung out, right?
Yeah, we hung out at your party. Yeah, your the Wayne Coast bunch. That was a lot of fun, actually. Yeah, I was at so for the audience, I described the occasion, Kevin.
The occasion was the annual Data Bash in Las Vegas, in other words, known as Snowflake Summit.
Hmm.
And on the first day, Ethan Aaron of low key fame, which I feel like is a bit of an oxymoron, uh, a whole bunch of people together for a low key event that ended up becoming like 700 RSVPs. It was him, us, and four other companies, and it was on a rooftop uh, beer park that overlooks the fountains. And if you ask me about why there are water fountains in Las Vegas, don't get me started. But they are there, and it was a whole lot of fun. About 500 people came through, including Joe, and we just chatted into the night.
Yeah, that was pretty fun. Yeah, I didn't tell that many people I was showing up. I think I told you and maybe a couple other people, but I just wanted to make it a surprise. I figured, especially based on the RSVP list, there's going to be a lot of people there. So, yeah, it was a lot of fun, man. It's funny. I tried getting some friends in later in the night, and they couldn't get in because I think you guys are well past capacity, and the bar was complaining that you exceeded the limit. So, you had a bunch of friends waiting outside, which unfortunately they couldn't get in, but is what it is. So,
Damn, that's too bad. But thankfully, some people came through then. Chris came through with
oh,
like
he's
10
one of the
minutes
guys.
to
I
go.
had to, I had to sneak him in. I had to get, yeah. I
Really?
was like, he was already here. I had to make up some story about that. Yeah, he almost didn't get in. He was there for like a beer, which if you know Chris, it's not a lot. So,
It's the start of the night. Midnight, start of the night. Let's go. Kind data streets.
yeah.
Hashtag. But yeah, thanks for popping by because you've been traveling a lot recently, right?
Yeah, I've been traveling a bit, so it's been taking July off, and I think most of June as well. Well, no, it's total lie. June was actually a lot of travel, but July and then starting back up in August again. So we're recording this about what is it, July 27th? Probably get out in a few weeks. But the yeah, so what is it? Going to Atlanta, then Australia for a couple week tour. And then,
Nice.
yeah, so it's gonna be a lot of fun, man. But I don't know, it's nice to have some downtime too, and just be able to focus on stuff. I'm sure you know, it's just traveling's cool, but focus time's cool too. So
Yeah, it's nice to just hunker down for a bit. Although flights are a great time to do it. The problem is you can't keep flying.
no, you can't. Well, international flights kind of suck too, but because it's like you want to use that time to work, but depending where you're going, you want to use that time to start adjusting to the time zone. So I
Right.
think it depends like what direction you're flying. So depending where it is, either try and force yourself to stay up, especially if you're going to like Asia or that direction, like just stay up and work. If you're going to Europe, a bit of a different story, but yeah, I don't know. It's all fun though. But you live in the East Coast, so it's like Europe ain't that far for you. I think it's about as far for you to get here as it is to it's a lovely place in Europe. So, but yeah,
Totally. Yeah,
oh,
there's so
nice.
many geographical things that are like. Did you know that the southern tip of Brazil is farther from the northern tip of Brazil than the northern tip is from Canada?
Wait, what?
Yeah, it's really weird. Yeah, it's Brazil is surprisingly large, and the U.S. is surprisingly small, at least on a relative
Yeah.
scale.
I didn't know that. I always learn some weird, quirky thing talking to you. It's
Just get
hilarious.
it off. Start off that way. But
Yeah, it's for the audience. Like Kevin and I, we tend to nerd snipe each other. I think as he calls it. So um, it's um, it's an example of that.
well,
So yeah,
well, your book was just you know a nerd shotgun in a way. I love the things that you read that you leave with like 30 tabs open. And like your newsletter is one of those things. Swix, who has a podcast called the Latent Space Podcast, one of
Hmm.
the most widely ranging people that I know. First in dev tools, but now deep in AI. Yeah, he's one of those people. I feel like you and Swix would get along.
Yeah, yeah. Do you know Swix? Make an intro. Otherwise, I'll see what we can do. I'm just following the podcast right now. That's pretty cool. Uh,
Yeah, shout out to Swix.
that's cool. Yeah, I always like nerds. So and you're one of my favorite nerds. Which is, so yeah, we've done a few podcasts together back in the day. Yeah, and it's one of the things we were talking about before the show. I think the a lot of the discussions we had were back in the good old days, right? Back when money was cheap and champagne flowed freely, and everyone had nice swag. So now we're in the era of rising rates. Fed just raised rates yesterday, and I think we're in the swag apocalypse right now. So um, it's like,
Yeah, it's in our space where the interest rates rule the world. Mr. Powell rules the world, but then when the public markets, the multiples of these tech companies goes down, and it affects the later stage markets. It trickles all the way down. So we are definitely far from the heyday, and I think it's I don't shed that many tears for venture backed startups, but it has ramifications in our space generally. Right,
oh
data
yeah,
teams aren't growing as quickly, and sometimes they're shrinking in size or disappearing altogether, which will be interesting to square with LLMs. I feel like that's one of the LLMs and superconductivity since the last time we chatted. Kind of this is an interesting arc that we're on.
it was unexpected too, right? But at
Right,
this time last year, if you were to say, yeah, I think that OpenAI, the real killer feature they're going to do is put a form in front of GPT, and that's going to change everything. Which is what they did. I mean, just it's a form. HTML
right.
saved the day, and so but it is funny because I had this time last year I was kind of predicting there was going to be another machine learning winter going on. You had
Mm,
some stuff happening, but kind of more broadly, just because it felt like the whole data industry was about to go into a hibernation, which to a large extent it has. I think
right.
it's pretty evident. So,
Yeah. Spend is going down. Team size is going down.
mhm.
Kudos to the OpenAI team where it feels like if we ask the question, why did OpenAI come up with ChatGPT and not Microsoft or Google
Mm,
or Meta? You know, uh, I feel like if it was predictable, right? If it was obvious that GPT was the next item to unlock on the human tech tree, then a big company would have done it.
right.
But the fact that OpenAI did it means that it was unpredictable. And I'm guessing, I mean, it seems like it's a triple innovation, maybe even more, right? The idea that you can scale up what is, the Transformer paper came out not super long ago, but a decent time ago from Google. Put in more data, put in a UI, add in the reinforcement learning from human feedback, and now
Mhm.
you get this what is perceived to be a major step forward. I don't think anyone could have seen that.
I mean, it would have already been done. So,
Yeah,
I
right,
mean, Google had their search for a long time, and again, that's interesting because it was just a form on top of I don't know, a pretty intricate search mechanism back in the day, and still is very very elegant, obviously. But I think that obviously companies like Google flat-footed, and they're the ones that came up with this stuff. Surprisingly enough, just goes to show you shouldn't take anything for granted in this industry. Things change very quick. So,
it's. I feel like Google can really prove themselves if they come back with the lead because even in our space, right, Edgar Cod, inventor of the relational database,
mhm.
at least as we know it, like why is it that he came up with it at IBM, but Oracle was the company to really commercialize it
Right.
in that wave,
Hmm.
right? The personal computer or at least the UI at Xerox, and it was Apple, it's
Right.
Google, and then it was OpenAI. Google's trying to reclaim the lead. We'll see.
Right. Yeah, that's a good observation too. It's yeah, and I'm curious to see where this all goes because it's as I was telling people, it's the discussions of the modern data stack. I was joking. At Ethan Aaron's conference a few weeks ago, but partly because Veronica was on, Durgan was on there, and she works at Saks, and Saks is fashion oriented. So it's like it really felt like modern data stack is like last season's fashion. We've really moved on. Like it's not what's cool anymore. And but I think there's a grain of truth to that as well. Like I still see a lot of discussions of modern data stack. I mean, I think it's had its place. It's relevant, but the discussion I think for me needs to move on. Whether or not like is a modern data stack dead or not. Like to me, it's like it's interesting, but it's not that interesting compared to all the stuff that's happening right now. It feels like everything's evolving super fast. So,
what do you think the conversation is shifting to, and what do you think it should shift to?
I think really what it's shifting to, at least as far as I can tell, is what's the role of everything. Is the industry about to have a complete inversion, for example, in terms of how we interact with data? All the standard practices we've done for years, or is this all a mirage, and are we fooling ourselves into thinking this is something hyper important? That's being large language models and AI. Is this a hype cycle where because we couldn't get the foundations correct with data quality, governance, and so forth, are we actually fooling ourselves into thinking this is an inflection point?
Right. Totally. I think one of the issues is, well, to maybe restate the problem, at least how I observe it, is that the activation energy to getting some sort of business value out of an enterprise LLM, it's so low, right? Like, yes, you have companies like Cohere that are working on, like Cohere and Scale, that are building enterprise specific LLMs. But if you're the CTO at a reasonably sized company, you can get like a Delta team on the case, get Llama 2, fine tune, and then it seems to work. If you look under the covers and look at how many hallucinations there are, then that's a problem.
Yep.
But I don't think we've seen a technology recently where the perceived value to activation energy is so high.
Right.
Right.
That's true.
I don't know if data teams can hold back the floodgates, though. You mentioned data governance and data quality, and we in this world know, and Chad Sanderson is painting a really accurate picture, I feel, about the Jenga blocks, right? How it all depends on the upstream data, and much of LLM engineering or AI engineering is data engineering with twists. But and the data is not ready. But do we, as like data practitioners, have can we hold the door? I guess is the question.
It's a really good question. I mean, I was having this discussion with John Cook on the podcast a while ago, but one of the things he brought up, and I thought it was a good point, was does the data stack even matter if you could just throw an LLM, say, on top of a source system and just query the source or maybe a replica of it, so you're not bombarding it? Like, does that effectively achieve the same thing as you would if you had a data warehouse and all these machinations that go into it? And maybe there's an argument for that, actually. Maybe this is a different way of viewing the world, or maybe a better way. I don't know. I would need to experiment with these things and look at it a bit more deeply. But he does have a good point. Is that sort of middle tier necessary at this point? I think it remains to be seen. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. So,
I feel like we need an answer to that question, and academia would be such a good place. Like, what is the correct amount and correct structure of data to present to an LLM to maximize something, right? To like minimize hallucination, to maximize perceived value, actual value, whatever. Because I don't know. Some part of me thinks that we can't plop like ChatGPT on top of LangChain with a database connector, right? Right. That maybe there's a world where shout out to Juan Cicada that you put in
Yep.
semantic triples, right? Subject, object, predicate, and
Yeah.
that this is the most concise way to present information. Uh, I I would love to know, and I think a lot of people would love to know, but it's hard to do that research.
It is hard to do that research. It's one of the cruxes of the book I've been working on. Is that I felt it should be done by now, and it would have been done, but for a variety of reasons, it's not. One, I'm busy with writing courses and all that fun stuff, and two, the other part of it is it's LLMs really threw me for a loop because I'm like, okay, so what does this mean for data modeling at the end of the day? What is a data model? Um, in when you reflect on something like transformers, for example, which are able to translate concepts between each other, and I think I'm coming to a better idea of what the impacts of this is going to be. And who else? Who was I talking to? Um, and then somebody will come back in a bit, but we're talking about the notion of relational embeddings, really, and maybe that's something that might be you know uh,
Mm,
that might be an interesting twist. So anyway, there's a lot of machinations to this, but I feel like the thinking that got us here up to this point as an industry, we're going to see a fusion of a lot of ideas. Like what Juan's been pushing knowledge graphs forever, um, but sort of what's next, because I feel like what we've been doing for the past 30, 40 years as an industry, arguing about adding value and all this fun stuff, and like the fact that everyone talks about data governance, a pain in the ass to do, it's super slow. Data quality, we talk about it all the time. Data quality disasters are everywhere, so obviously like what we've been trying to do hasn't been working, to be frank. So we need to try something else, and maybe this is, as I wrote a few maybe a month or two ago, but I felt like large language models might be the hopefully maybe the tipping point, because if everyone's excited about this stuff, they're going to realize what a horror show their data is, and
right.
hopefully they'll do something about it. But because if you can't get, if this isn't the impetus, I don't know what is.
Totally. I think it could, it's definitely going to depend on the company, right? Some company that's
Yep.
going to, steamroll through it and already have LLMs in production.
Right.
Right? Other companies will take a more slow approach to breathe a little bit. I think you're right that it could be a tool for good potentially or bad, and that I don't know what the right way to. I mean, speaking of Oppenheimer, right? I don't think it's
Yeah.
necessarily at the extent of the atomic bomb, but like, how do you even have a conversation about this with the rest of the company as a data practitioner? Because what we don't want is shadow AI, and
Right.
I just totally randomly made up this concept, but
Oh no,
I,
it's real.
it's possible that a small eng team comes by and says, we need access to our Snowflake so that we can start putting it into, like, putting the results of SQL queries into prompts. And
Yeah.
then when you say, no, they say, okay, well, screw that. All the data is in Postgres anyways. Well, some of the data is
Right.
in
Right.
Postgres. We're going to put it into Postgres and screw you. I feel like that's the worst case scenario
Hmm.
because the whole governance project is undermined.
Yeah. Well, like governance projects are typically undermined too. So
Yeah, right, right. Uh, Undermined by default. Yeah,
and maybe it's just, I think maybe the way we've been approaching governance and all these kind of things, maybe we've been doing it wrong a lot, because it seems like it becomes almost sort of rent seeking behavior on the part of the people who
mm,
are doing the initiatives. And that, yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, I would say data governance is definitely a blind spot for me in a lot of ways. I'm not going to say I'm an expert in this, but I do know a lot of people who are very good at it, and that's what they do for a living and stuff. And it just seems like the frustrations I see them having year after year are the same frustrations they've been having year after year for the same reasons. And so I don't know. It's that old apocryphal quote, but to Einstein, definition of insanity and stuff. So, but I don't know, man.
right.
It's interesting to see. But you work in observability, for example. Like, what are your thoughts on how observability might evolve in the wake of all the recent AI developments?
The the one thing that is for sure and I'll also from like certain to uncertain is that the certain thing is that in the companies where there's an initiative to build some type of enterprise LM use case, whether it's external support, internal knowledge base, build it into the product, and the data team is involved, that the need for observability goes up
Yep.
big time. Even if the entire company doesn't acknowledge it, at least the data team is like, yikes, right? That if we're pulling structured data into the prompts or using it to fine tune, that the stakes are now very high, and it's almost like you took the need for data quality. I'll put it along two axes, right? The consequences of a mistake and the
Mm.
frequency of it. So
Mm.
uh, previously, when the main vein of data was business intelligence, executive reporting, maybe it was done on a quarterly basis, probably more frequent. That because you had such a vetting process and is relatively infrequent, like yes, data quality is a problem, but relatively low frequency and sometimes low importance. But when you have automations on top of the warehouse, let's say using reverse ETL, right? You're talking to the customer, high importance, and is all the time. And then you put an LLM on top of it, you add this third dimension, which is the variation, right?
Yep.
High frequency, high importance, and you have not no clue, but is very opaque. So the need is going up for sure. I think the jury is still out on how data observability can help safe deployment of LLMs
Mm.
in the LLMs themselves. Upstream data, for sure, it's a help. Does it solve all the problems? No, right?
Right.
Because so many of the problems are organizational, not technological.
Oh yeah.
But I think the it's very difficult to build technologies in the space where the problems aren't defined because the technologies aren't set
Mm.
in place, the players aren't there, right? Is LangChain the standard or is there another standard? Who is building these? Is it data scientists or engineers? It's difficult.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there.
Right. I mean, we know that there's tons of companies being spun up, but that seems like a problem for tomorrow. We got to solve the problem for today.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. Yeah, solve the problem for today. And again, it's just the other things that have been on my mind too is okay, 0% interest rates. Data teams. I think we're used to operating in a different type of environment. And you had a whole slew of data practitioners that grew up in a time of abundance. You could just throw everything into one big table, for example, just because why not? Just throw more compute at it because why the hell not? Now all that's under scrutiny. I think processes are getting a lot more rigorous, and data teams are being cut, as you talked about, right? And so, but I guess what do you foresee as the impacts of AI on I guess the productivity of a data team? And by productivity, I mean the economic sense, where you can do a lot more with a lot less. And by this, I mean a lot less people. So,
I I think data teams are in the unique position where they both hold the keys to the kingdom, right? Like they are the best people at a company at centralizing and using large volumes of structured data, right? Like you probably have amazing engineers at a lot of companies, but amazing engineers don't know about Kimball necessarily, right? They don't know how to write that gnarly SQL query to get you there. So it's that much is clear, and I think at the same time, LMs can aid data teams.
right.
I haven't, previous to Metaplane, I was doing a lot of work on automated data analysis,
Mm,
and I think I've thrown up, I've thrown in the towel in a sense, but I think this is as promising as we've ever seen in terms of automating uh, the writing of SQL and
yeah.
potentially even a higher level of abstraction is surprisingly good. Definitely not perfect, but much better than anything that we've seen.
What were some of the automation approaches that you had taken with automated analytics?
There was rule-based approaches
Mm,
that were pretty uh, it was very simple. Like we would scan your columns, get the statistics of the columns, and find differences between any metrics based on groups, and then surface
okay.
those groups after correcting for significance. And it never worked particularly well from
Mm,
in a fully modeled, fully understood environment that was very clean. The problem is that insight generation is a tough game, right? Like by definition, insights are rare and they become
yeah.
even more rare. And if you suggest false positives, it's like, what the hell is this tool doing? This is not interesting, right?
Hmm.
You know, Alabama has so many lower sales because we, axed that geo. Uh, but
Right.
if you back up, like the lack of a structured data model means that there's a lot of custom data engineering that needs to go into this product,
Yeah.
uh, like an automated insights product. And even when you add machine learning to the mix, where what we did back in the day is we scraped Tableau, Public, Many Eyes, which is a previous like visualization tool, in Plotly, and looked at the visualizations that people conducted based on the data sets that they had. So we scraped the CSVs, scraped the graphs, scraped the analyses, and then tried to predict one from the other using a neural net.
Interesting.
And it worked well from a predictive standpoint, uh, in the sense that it outperformed humans doing the same task. But it was predicated on having a really clean CSV. And we know that
Mm.
that's never the case, right? It is never the case in the real, in the mean data streets. So, no, hats off to ChatGPT if it can handle both of those problems. And I think it can pretty convincingly, better than anything that we did in the past, of like both the automated analysis and the
Yeah.
handling a diverse set of data models or no data model whatsoever.
Have you dorked out with a code interpreter?
I have. Oh, don't get me started. I use ChatGPT all the time. Maybe I should have started off with that, but
Oh,
I use it
I do
all.
too. It's a great tool. May as well.
What do you use it for?
I use it for a lot of ideation and stuff. I also use it. Yeah, I mean, I use it for everything to writing chore lists for my kids to, just getting. I think it helps you uncover a lot of blind spots. Maybe when you're thinking of content, I won't use it to write content. I think it maybe for mundane stuff like describing, okay, like what is a database. Maybe it does a good job at that. But I think for anything that involves original thought or developing a story arc that's part of your internal narrative, I think it does actually. It's almost more work to go and fix it than it is just to do it yourself. So that's
Mm,
that's what I use it a lot for. Some code stuff, but at the moment I've been more kind of in pontificator mode versus code mode. So that's kind of where I've been. But yeah, what do you use it for?
I mean, I love all those use cases. The mundane stuff is like finding recipes.
That's a
This
good one.
is right. It's like I don't want to go like halfway down page two in Google, and then the blog post is like 1,000 words about how someone's grandma used to cook the mapo tofu, and
Oh
then you
yeah.
finally get to the recipe, right? It's like the recipe, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of unit tests. I think unit tests
Interesting.
are the universally agreed upon mundane work that engineers don't want to do, and I am one of them. And it's quite good, like making the synthetic data, coming up with a diverse set of test cases, refactoring to a new unit testing framework. Uh,
Nice.
yeah, it's good stuff. And lastly, pandas optimization, where
Mm.
you in the audience, and you know how it is, Joe, that when you work in Python and in pandas, it's like flipping a coin. Do you go down the C optimized route or do you stay in Python land? And the
Mm.
difference is like three orders of magnitude,
Oh yeah.
but it's very hard to know. So, but ChatGPT does know, at least better than me. I've been using it for like 10 years, but even I don't, do you min parentheses or dot min? And
Hmm. That's really interesting.
yeah, got some major speed ups in metaplane modeling thanks to ChatGPT. Definitely worth the $20 a month just from that.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's really fascinating. And then code interpreter, you kind of knocked your socks off when I mentioned that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that the ability to bridge the gap uh, between like words and code. I mean, on a very abstract level, I just like how it works.
Hmm.
Right? I just like it's very intuitive for me, at least, as someone who mostly works in a notebook environment,
Mm.
to like iterate on charts without having to switch between a whole bunch of tabs. But I think the ability to have natural language context next to your code itself and the visualizations and the analyses, like really closes like the thinking loop,
Yeah,
you know, and that is super powerful because I feel like the your speed at going from a question to answer is probably the most important variable when it comes to exploratory analysis,
hmm,
and that code interpreter does a good job of that.
that's a really good insight.
Yeah. What have
Reminds me
you
of-
been using it?
I've only dorked around with it for a bit. I haven't used it that much yet. So, like I said, I've been more in like thinking mode and not writing code mode. But I'll be back sure enough. But it's been a lot more research really. So I mean, um, so my days typically right now are spent like reading, researching, taking notes, working on some stuff, and then just working on courses. Right. So it's like it just have a lot of content I need to get out. But uh, but
How
yeah.
does sorry, how
What were
does
you
I'm
saying?
curious, how does curriculum development, how is that affected by ChatGPT from your perspective?
I think it speeds it up quite a bit, right? So, I mean, I think it's great for stuff like writing quiz questions,
Yes,
right? It will do a better job
that's
than
what
we
I think.
will. It's fast, but you have to know what a good quiz question is, and I think that's where you come in. So it's like a lot of things with these LLMs. You can definitely use it, but you got to know what a good output looks like, right? So with
Mm,
quiz question development, for example, you might give it some parameters. Like I need a quiz question. I need like a formative, which is a type of a quiz question. I need a formative question about these bullet points here based upon these other criteria. And it does a fantastic job at coming up with quiz questions. I think humans just would it would take you about 50 times longer to come up with these questions. And so, but the speed at which you can come up with questions is not the same thing as coming up with a good question. I think it's still where the person comes in. Like you still have to go back through and refactor things because it might be a quiz question based on the book I wrote, right? So it's like ChatGPT will not have that context because it doesn't know the book. Um,
mm,
and so if I ask it to come up with a quiz question on say the data engineering lifecycle, which is a key part of the book, it will have no idea. It'll make something up because it has to complete the
yeah,
answer, right? It knows it has to complete
right.
the answer, but it's going to be a bullshit answer. And so that's I think the big sort of difference really. So I think it makes you what I've noticed is it actually makes you better at thinking through what you're trying to teach because you're trying to teach chat gpt at the same time. Um, so
Interesting.
yeah, so I mean that's how I
I
think curriculum development is changing, right? It speeds things up, it slows you down, and you just got to know what gear to be in when you're using it. It's just like driving a truck. If with a six shift, if you ever did that back in the day, same thing. So it's like,
and for the content in the curriculum itself, are you teaching aspiring or veteran data engineers how to use ChatGPT within their jobs?
not necessarily for one of the courses I'm doing. I think for um, the other one to be announced yet. I can't really say much, but
Okay.
it's a simulation based approach, right? So the whole concept is first day on the job. You start as a data engineer, and the company really they want two things. They want batch and streaming analytics, and they also wanted to implement an LLM because why not,
Very
right?
realistic. Right.
Right. I mean, this is what
Yeah.
happens, right?
This
So
is, yeah, exactly.
the first bit's going to be definitely like, okay, go require the gather the requirements. Like what when they say LLM, like what is that supposed to be exactly? If they want to interface with ChatGPT or do they want to use Llama, like what's it supposed to do, right? So this is sort of the notion of it. And I've been thinking about ChatGPT in the context, because these are more on MOOCs. I don't know that a GPT is going to help you, but I've been thinking about this in the perspective of teaching university courses, which I also do, and I think that that's an interesting one. I've been talking with other professors about how they view ChatGPT and curriculum. And I think the definitely the I think the overwhelming recognition is that it's here to stay. You're not going to fight it. You're not going to tell a student not to use it.
Mhm.
They'll just go use it.
Oh,
If you tell them not to use it, they'll probably use it more actually. So just because that's how it is. And so one of the things I've been thinking of is, okay, so if I give you like poorly written code, for example, right? And you're going to use ChatGPT. Figure out how to make this better. Like, there's
mm,
bugs in the system, right? And again, these are the actual things that you find on the job. It's not like the code's perfect and everything works and you're writing things from scratch. Your first day on the job is typically, oh, I don't know, something just broke. Why don't you go figure it out, right?
totally. Like, yeah, there's a God table that 10 reports are using, and the person who wrote it left 2 years ago. Like, refactor it. And also, by the way, it's 1,000 lines of code. It's,
Yep.
have you, it makes me think, could, is it possible to use ChatGPT for stakeholder simulation, right? To like have that conversation to gather requirements.
I've been playing with this actually. Yep.
Oh, nice.
Yep. It works.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so you set up the scenario like, I'm at company X. These are the stakeholders here. Because I was trying this out. Because I was like, okay, so like, what would it look like if I were to, um, you know, have a simulated requirements gathering exercise, and it does it.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I I would love to take that course. It seems like it's hitting on an aspect of data work that has, I mean, not necessarily been neglected, but kind of hard to address in in
Mm-hmm.
a classroom setting. Right.
Well, it is, and in universities I advise, for example, I'm always like, why don't you teach more stuff like the things that people do on a day-to-day basis, like talking to stakeholders, understanding what they want, you know, uh,
Well,
diplomacy and all this stuff, right? Like building stuff that people want. That's a big thing. Um, and I think the one of the courses I'm working on, it's on a MOOC, which you'll find out about soon, the audience. But the thing the way I feel like data is taught right now, it's taught. We teach the mechanics. We teach, okay, pandas, Spark, all this stuff, but that's, I would say, 25% of the job. The other 25%, the other part is just like knowing, okay, how do I architect correctly, given discussions with stakeholders, and I think what's missing is providing more of a simulation environment, right? If you're going to
mm,
fly a plane, you wouldn't just read the manual on how a plane works, right? You'd probably do a lot of flight simulations and probably go fly a plane once in a while. But that's not how we teach data right now. Surprisingly enough, it's like, as you point out, clean data sets, clean CSVs, always the expectation, and it's very rote and mechanical. I'm like, and when I see people graduate from these programs, they're shell shocked. They get to the first day on the job, and they're like, holy crap. I'm not just setting up Spark jobs all of a sudden. I'm not just diving into Snowflake. I'm actually having to figure out what my job is, right? So that's the reality check, that this is the reality of the job. And so I think that the current way we teach people data skills, I think we do a giant disservice to them by
mm.
ignoring all the important stuff. You know.
They're lucky to have you there, because it reminds me of two things. One is we chatted about like this mechanical engineering undergrad at MIT, the capstone course. One of them
Mhm.
is called 2009. It's like product design processes.
That
But
class looks so cool.
yeah, I am so jealous. It's way past my pay grade because you have to take like a whole bunch of classes on
Mm.
no the mechanical engineering canon, but it's a one semester where you have an objective and a team, and you just build. cool things, but along the way is like the actual design process, right? Getting, stakeholder feedback, gathering requirements, iterating together with external parties, and at the end, you have a product that many have gone on to be commercialized.
Wow.
So, uh, and talking with my friends who did that class who are now, doing crazy things at like Apple or other hardware companies, are like, now is the best class at MIT by far.
What do they like about it?
They like that they were finally, if I could like synthesize it, it's like we were finally unleashed, right? Like
Mm,
after semesters of learning like heat and mass transfer, that
mm,
finally I get to build a thing, like a complete thing, not to demonstrate theoretical understanding, but to solve a user's problem.
right.
And and they get to demo it on stage, and it's like a whole event. Like a lot of people end up going to these launch events. Uh, yeah, it's a combination of the fame you get, the hype of the course, and putting skills to practice. I feel like is very gratifying, not for everyone, but I think for a lot of people.
That's super cool.
Yeah, it's and the they're lucky to have you there as like a tether to the real world, because otherwise I feel like in a lot of universities they kind of spin off in a bubble chamber, right? You have business schools where people go through and don't learn sales, right?
Which
There's
is
not like a
crazy.
single
Only the most important skill you could have.
exactly.
It's
It's
like,
like you know, like you want to, but like you're learning Series C financial venture accounting, right?
Mhm.
It's just like how about we learn how to close a contract? I
Yep.
mean, I say this in a self-critiquing way because I never took that course and I had to like learn by doing, but
Oh
I feel like
yeah.
there's some prep.
Oh yeah. No, that's absolutely correct. Like, it's funny too because I talked to quite a few startup founders, they're very famous ones too. I will say in our industry. Once you, if I said the names, you'd be like, yeah, big name. And I think we were talking about this a while ago, but it's still true. It's interesting when you build a great product. It's strange people just automatically show up. You realize real quick that things like distribution, you know, getting your name out there, for example, sales, these they're pretty important things. It's how you keep a business afloat. So
Right. Providing value and capturing a part of that value. Who knew? Right?
it's bizarre. How did you learn all this stuff, though? I mean, you're doing good. And you say you didn't have any formal training in this. How did you have to level up in things like sales and distribution and marketing?
Uh, Mentors and hiring great people. Uh, I I heard early on. I think these were the founders of Drift, where they said like, first time founders focus on product, second time founders focus on distribution,
Mm,
and it. I think the truth is somewhere in between. You can't go super hard on either, otherwise you're going to have a blind spot. But
yeah.
that led me to, one thing that's amazing about the world, being a founder today in the States, but also specifically after spending some time in Silicon Valley, is that it's like you're in RuneScape or in like World of Warcraft and you just got out of the tutorial, but there's like these high level players just like walking around level 99 and just like dropping armor for you to, maybe you don't have the skills to like wield the two-handed sword yet, but like it means nothing to them, but it means everything to you.
Interesting.
And when it comes to mentorship, yeah, we have great investors who has guided us along the path. And did we make the mistakes that they told us not to make? Of course. But at least we recognized that it was a mistake instead of continuing to do it. And now we have amazing salespeople that, I mean, far beyond what I could do. But at least I feel like uh, getting help from mentors helps you recognize greatness in all of its forms.
That's super key. What was the most valuable thing your mentor taught you, or you got maybe a piece of advice you got from a mentor?
Ooh, that's a good I think it is. I think it's what Dharmesh Shah said from HubSpot.
Mm,
An angel of ours knows our team very well. That he said, uh, it's like the highest level of like what exactly are we doing here? Like what is the point of the startup? And he said that success is making the people who believed in you look brilliant.
mm, interesting.
And I always tossed it over in my mind of like, obviously the this is not the most important thing in the world, but at least in our capitalist structure, that financial success is success, right? Returning a multiple to your investors, building a profitable company. But I think as time goes on, like yeah, it's the real currency of startups to me is belief, right?
Mm,
That the founders had to believe in something. They had to have people believe in them. There's entire families have to believe in each other. Friends had to believe in you to come on board, and that making them feel like they made a good choice is, I think, the most important thing. And a lot of things go downstream from that, but I think about that probably every day. But yeah, what about you? What's the most impactful thing a mentor told you?
um, my old boss, he's really wealthy, and I asked him one day, how do you make a lot of money? And he's like, it's pretty easy. You just sell stuff that people want to buy. That's it.
Yeah,
I mean, it was like,
that's
yeah, all right, end of story. So, but he was absolutely correct. Um, but it's just that hard, right? But what he meant by that too, there's a lot to read into that. It's about having a product again that people believe in, right? And are willing to with their money and so forth. And you got to create that need or that desire, right? So again, distribution. This guy was one of the best marketers I think I've ever met in my entire life. He was too good, and so that taught me a
true.
lot. Yeah, I mean, I can't get into the story, but
Yeah, totally.
yeah, but it was definitely I think just one of the simplest pieces of advice. But there's a lot that goes into that, right? Like selling people that things they want to buy. I mean, we do that. We try and do that every day, right?
Right.
Um, but how do you know what people want to buy? How do you know what they want to buy from you, right? And so that's where it all comes in. So I think that was good advice. The other thing, another boss, he told me when I asked for the time, don't tell me how to make a watch, just tell me the time. This was also a
I love.
retort to me, like maybe telling him something, and he's just like, "Can you just please shut up and tell me the point that you're getting at?" So, but it was good advice, really good advice.
Really advice. And speaking of 0% interest rates, when money is flowing and cash is cheap, there's so many things that could be held as the goal, right? Impressing a certain investor, getting a big name investor, getting the highest valuation, having the biggest booth at a conference. But I love that. It's does it solve a problem or does it not solve a problem?
Hmm. Well, I mean,
Binary.
how many times have you been to a conference, during the good old days? And the company had the big booth, they had all the flashy stuff, and it mainly is a function of them, having raised a bunch of money. But like kind of behind the scenes, like their sales ain't doing much, if anything at all.
Right.
As the old saying goes, it's all hat, no cattle. So, um, and that was a lot of companies, I would say. Now you're starting to figure that out. The mixed metaphors. It's the old Warren Buffett saying, when the tide goes out, you find out who's been swimming naked, and that's basically the environment we're in right now. You find out, who has it together as a business and an operation.
Mhm.
Who has a process dialed, who has just a product that people really like, and believing in, and you find out who else is probably not going to make it. Like we're in a mass extinction event right now for data companies.
For sure.
It's going to be pretty gnarly. I mean, especially since rates just went up, not down yesterday. It ain't going to get better with time. So, you
It's
know,
and on the mass extinction for sure. I think that the tenor and the vibe of conferences is going to change, right?
Mm.
Summit is different. Coalesce coming up, DBT's conference in San Diego, I feel like is going to be different. But that ideally, when the tide goes out, right, that who's been swimming naked, but at the same time, there are definitely companies that have been growing through tough times, and that when Rock Lee and Naruto takes off its weights,
Mm.
right, and it starts, the times become good again. I think that the companies that survived and did well are going to be in a good position. So there's going to be
Oh,
a real separation of the
for
path.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, because you got to remember back in the day, back in the day, being like 3 years ago. I
Yeah,
mean, there are term sheets being thrown out to people with zero experience. I mean, we're talking like people. I would be like, well, I mean, you barely just finished school, or you barely just finished like high school, and now you're getting. I mean, this happened to a friend of mine. He was brilliant programmer and whatnot, but and worked in the crypto space and got a ton of money. I hired him. He was a punk 19-year-old kid that showed up, and said, "Did you get my resume?" And I'm like, "What resume?" And anyway, gave him a interview, and he's really good, one of the best engineers I've seen. But he went on to raise a ton of money too. But that was not uncommon. You have a lot of FOMO when you see that. It's like, Josh, if that person can raise money, why we all should be raising money. No offense to that person, but it's kind
totally.
of like it just. But there's just a lot of money being raised. But I would say a lot of it was backing people who. Um, but when you're backing people early on, it's like you don't have much to go off of, right? It's not like they're second time founders or have a track record. It's like you're taking a big bet on the person, and that's But there's a lot you need to learn. I guess is my
Right.
point, right? Like running a business, it's the weirdest thing. And there's no rule book that's going to prepare you for it. An MBA class ain't going to do much for you. Taking classes in entrepreneurship, it's great, but it's not going to help you running a business. Like running a business is how you learn to run a business. That's pretty much how
Right.
it is. So.
And there's the implicit start like curriculum in a sense, right? Where I've like every startup is a sequence of miracles in a sense, right? Getting to 1 million ARR is a miracle. Only
Yep.
4% of SaaS companies do it. Getting to 10, getting to 100, right? Growing the sales team, maturing your product. And I feel like it is remarkable and probably net good, depending on how you look at it, that like new founders can get a cut of the cake,
Mm-hmm.
right? That,
Yeah.
and I think that can advantage people who, don't fit the startup mold,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but
Well, you're in Boston, for
it,
example. It's not like startup central there. I mean, there's a lot of startups
it's
there, but
not
it ain't the Bay Area, right? And I live in Utah, which is, there's a lot of good companies here, but if you're from the Bay Area, it's kind of like, yeah, it's Utah. Who gives a crap, right? So, you have, if you're not there, you have a lot going against you, I think, still. So,
totally. Silicon Slopes, shout out to UFC, the second headline event in a year. Uh,
oh yeah,
right.
wish we could go, man. Yeah.
Data center, that's the way. But, I wish the best for all the founders who like now have to hit 5 miracles, like hit like 5 strikes in a
Yeah,
row
man.
just to break even. That's got to be a stressful situation. I
Oh
don't
yeah.
envy them.
Oh yeah. I have much compassion. I mean, because a lot of these people are my friends. I don't want to see anyone getting hurt, and
Yeah,
but I mean, it just reminds me of like trench warfare in World War I, where it's like you never know. The guy next to you is probably gonna get his brains blown out any second, or you might. You just don't know, and that's just the reality of it. That's how it is. You just got to do the best you can in the environment you are. I mean, it reminds me of this. Um, who was it? Chatting with Wayne Marino. He used to be the chief operating officer at Under Armour, which maybe a Boston company there. But he was telling me that Kevin Plank, the guy who used to run the company, he had the
hmm,
saying, right, and he said no loser talk. So, and Kevin's also known to be a bit bombastic, right? So take it for what it's worth. But the no loser talk quote stuck with me. What he meant by that was everyone's in the same playing field. So I don't want you going out there and blaming the economy. I don't want you going out there and blaming this, that, or the other thing that everyone else has to deal with. You need to focus on the game you're playing and play it the best you can against everybody else, right? Everyone's in the same situation. Everyone is
right.
operating in a recession right now. So like that's not an excuse for not performing. You have to perform to the
Mhm.
best of your abilities. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So it is what it is. You just have to learn to navigate it. Things change, adapt. So,
Totally. For
but,
there's I mean, not to get into too much UFC talk, but like Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman, right? He like lost 3 rounds out of 4, got the head kick, but then it's like it's in the rematch, right? What was it like? Mr. Atlas said, the champs have like a 30% boost, right? And we saw that, right? He came in with a winner's mentality and convincingly won.
It counts for a lot. Well, cool, man. It's been great chatting with you. I know we're almost at the top of the hour here. Yeah, I have to have you back on, man. I want to get you back on the Monday morning data chat at some point. So I'll send an invite over to you for that.
And always fun to catch up. And yeah, jealous of you again being near the Delta Center. Yeah, if anyone who's there, yeah, Gaethje versus Poirier and Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira.
And it's gonna be so good. I mean, it sucks, dude. It's just right down the street from me, and I'm not going because tickets are like the good tickets are about $1,100 right now. So
Crazy.
I think my wife would freak out if she's like, "What, you just bought what?" Tickets, don't you know? It's cheaper than Taylor Swift. So
definitely don't have to have Dana White, chasing you down for illegally streaming it, right? But what can you? Yeah.
I'll have to tell you some stories back in the day. I used to do some work with the UFC, so we can talk about that at maybe another time. But yeah, good group of people. Definitely interesting group. But
totally.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. It's great chatting with you as always. So yeah, we'll inevitably catch up soon. So
yeah, talk soon.
Yeah,
see you, Joe.
Yeah, take
Bye.
care. Just one second.